In this episode of Serenity Now for Entrepreneurs, we speak with Chae K of Earthling-Foods, a company that is a food processor and makes delicious pastries called dèquoise, a cousin of the macaron. We discuss two key questions about scaling her business. Here is one of them.
Scaling involves bringing new team members on board and managing a group of people the size of, how do you go from managing 4 people to all of a sudden 10 people or 20 people and then 50 people?
A couple of responses from the Serenity Sisters include,
I did not scale up quickly, but I've worked with 2 people and now I'm 25 or 30, depending on the time of the year. And everything goes better when everything is documented. You don't have to remember what you said. You don't have to remember what you agreed upon. Everything's documented. Everybody knows what they're supposed to be doing and what their role is. I've seen the more documented we are in our own firm, the better I see the culture getting.
You can't really confide in your employees. If you have a partner, sometimes you don't see eye to eye. And so who do you talk to then? And what I found very useful was I joined business groups where you meet monthly. It's a short meeting either in the morning or in the evening, and you're talking to other like-minded people. And I gleaned so much knowledge from them just because I heard their stories.
If you are a business that's in the process of scaling up, this is a great episode to capture learnings from seasoned entrepreneurs who have seen and been through a lot in the ventures that they lead. There often isn't a consistent pathway in business, but you may find this episode covers some of your questions and could bring you some serenity now. Let's take a listen. Welcome to this episode of Serenity Now for Entrepreneurs. I am very excited to have a guest that I know. Actually, we work with her at Granted. Her name is Chae K, and she is co-founder of Earthling-Foods. She, along with her brother, Jimmy, opened a business in 2020 that creates delicious gluten-free pastries called dèquoise. And in the past year, the company has explored automation in their manufacturing process and worked with machine manufacturers to develop, a different line, a customized line of production equipment. And that is in order to increase their capacity. So I'm excited to welcome Chae to the podcast today. Welcome.
Hey, nice to meet you, everyone.
Awesome. So maybe I could have you tell us a little bit more about yourself and your company.
Earthling-Foods, our company, started kind of amidst during the 2020 pandemic, the COVID pandemic. So before this business, I used to have like a retail shop, a bubble tea shop that was kind of on the ground and selling directly to customers, walk-in customers. And then during the pandemic, we kind of went downhill and we didn't see any customers. So during the pandemic, my brother and I started creating new menu items for our bubble tea shop. And one of the main things that we came up with was dèquoise, this almond meringue pastry that was extremely delicious. And it started in South Korea and Japan and Taiwan. But we didn't see this dessert being sold anywhere in Vancouver or Canada or even United States. So we decided to bring that into the Vancouver market during the pandemic. And we started with online sales through Instagram. And we started by hand delivering the desserts, driving our little cars to people's homes. From that, we became noticed by local cafes. Small mom and pop shops started carrying our desserts, and all of a sudden, big retailers reached out. TNT Supermarket, H Mart, Fresh Street Market, IGA. Now we're looking into partnering with much, much larger accounts such as Loblaws and Save on Foods and Blends. So now we're at a stage where we're scaling our operations hugely and trying to expand into the United States.
So as you know, and for our listeners' reminder, we love to support entrepreneurs and their growth. And so one thing that we do is something more a little bit like an advisory board, virtual advisory board, where you might have a couple of questions about how you're growing and direction and whatnot. And so we wanted you to pose to our team at Serenity Now a couple of questions today as you are thinking about that growth and trying to navigate through that. So Chae, let's start with your first question.
Yeah, so the first question I had kind of relates to, Stephanie, what you're helping us with through Granted. So what are like the best strategies or attitudes to have as an entrepreneur for entering a new market, for example, the United States, which is a market that's way, way bigger than the Canadian market. So what are like the best strategies or best attitude for us as young entrepreneurs to have?
Mm-hmm. Who wants to take that one?
I elect Rita.
All right, Rita, you've been elected.
Yeah, I always get elected. What's new? First, I want to say, hey, congratulations, Chae, to you and your brother. What could have turned into, a position where you just say, I guess we're done because we don't have walk-in traffic anymore because of what's happened globally, not just here. And you took it and you said, no, you know what? We're just going to put our heads down and we've got some other ideas. And so fantastic. Maybe that's a youth thing too. That's awesome. So congratulations on building that out. And then congratulations on moving it out so successfully. Perhaps that hand delivery, that personal touch is exactly why your name got out there. Because when you do something like that, those are the relationships you build. And that's perhaps why these other people started reaching out saying, who are you? So congratulations on that. As far as your first question, though, as you continue to grow and expand, what kind of attitude and or strategies, that's a huge question. We might do 10 episodes with you, perhaps. my first answer. But step number one, I think you hit the nail on the head. It is your attitude. Have you ever been swimming before or deep diving? Do you enjoy that?
I've taken one scuba diving lesson and it was in a pool and it was quite scary.
Right. Okay. So think of that as 10 times worse. That's your attitude. Mm-hmm. You're walking into that or diving into that at this point when you are looking to grow and you grow into a market. I mean, we have 37.5 million people in Canada. US has 10 times that number. And even if you go to one particular state, you've probably beaten out Canada. So the level and sheer volume and logistics pose quite a bit of challenges. I love the fact that you figured out manufacturing and figuring out how to ramp that up. That would be step number one, right? The next thing is, what kind of numbers are you looking at to move into this area? So if you're jumping your numbers by 10 times, by 20 times, by 100 times, that's when we start working through your cash flow and your projections, right? We need to know what those could possibly look like. And then you work that backwards in terms of what I need to be able to scale that kind of a production. It could be double, triple your manufacturing. It could be more staff. It could be more figuring out more lean efficiencies. We could look into ways to modify things that could be going into different grants with Stephanie or Shred with Peggy. That to the side. Then you're also looking at the challenges of how do I grow this? And you're going to have more staff on, along with the machinery, along with the production side. We've got to have maybe perhaps more vendors because we can't ever miss something. Now you've also added your logistics supply chain. Got to make sure you talk to insurance. Don't forget your insurance. How are you going to finance the whole thing? That's another beautiful piece. Enter in trade finance probably at this point in time. So, and who are you going to work with? What are your Inco trades terms? How are we going to look? There's a lot of pieces. So your attitude is going to be the same as when you took your first lesson. It was scary, wasn't it? But you're going to take a deep breath and you're going to do a little bit of research, and then you're going to start building a team around you. This is probably what your next steps are, is building that team out. You've got an awesome team with Granted so far. So they're going to be helping you and positioning you for your grants. And then from there, we're going to have to likely scale up in different areas and different partners. But one big thing you need to talk to and make sure you understand very, very well is your tax side. Candice, I'll hand that over to you, because I probably said a few things. Or you can ask some questions, Chae, because I've unpacked a little.
I'll jump in. So when I hear about entrepreneurs wanting to expand into the States, my first question is who's your accounting partner? Who are you working with on the accounting side? Because when you are working with the United States, there's all sorts of considerations. The biggest thing is the volume, because every state has their own tax regime, and some of those states have multiple tax regimes within that state because they have counties. So meandering through that is not for the faint of heart. And then there's also things like I understand the product that you produce requires refrigeration. So does that mean you're considering producing down there, which creates a presence in the United States, which changes the tax rules all again? So The littlest change can change how you're treated from a tax perspective. And my biggest thing is get the right person on your side so that you don't make any mistakes, because those could be expensive.
I'm going to go with, I used to be in international trade, and I think one of the most important things is to speak to businesses who have done what you are seeking to do. Of course, their products might be very different. And so ideally you're finding those in food who have, gone into the market. What did they find? And I think that there is a difference between pre-COVID and post-pandemic, right? So making sure that you are also getting some information about what are the differences between what happened before and what you're seeing now. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs are happy to share a little bit of their learnings as well. Be able to capture that, because that can often save you a lot of time and money. And then, of course, we always say this at Serenity, is finding the right partners to help you understand and learn faster, right? So, in terms of attitude, you have absolutely the right attitude. You are learning, you understand that this might be a little bit of drinking from a fire hose. And so it can feel very overwhelming. So making sure that you are surrounding yourself with trusted people that have either done this before or have connections to help you be successful in a new market. And it's okay to be making little mistakes along the way, but I think learning from that, I think, is always really important as well. So that's kind of the area that I would say I would just recommend in terms of resources and attitude. Paige, is there anything that you'd like to add to that?
I think if I were to, venture into what you're doing, just from my own point of view, how I would look at it, I think I would test the waters. I would pick a state and probably pick one that has more simpler tax complications and play in that arena. And if I were going to pick a state, I'd probably pick California. I'd pick a West Coast state, because I think you're probably going to find the most population in the West is more similar to what we have here in Vancouver. Mm-hmm. And it will likely be a very similar market for, their flavors, right? So that's the only thing I can suggest. Not that I have any experience in that. That just seems practical to me. And it just seems like it might mitigate some of the problems of trying to hit too many new areas all at once. If I were doing it, I'd pick California or Washington State, just because of logistics being close to us, right? Something like that.
For sure. And California is exactly where we're heading.
That's a smart move, I think. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
absolutely. So we've unpacked one question. And so let's go with a second question that you might have.
Yep. So the second question, I guess, kind of related to the first question. So scaling involves bringing new team members on board and managing a group of people the size of, how do you go from managing 4 people to all of a sudden 10 people or 20 people and then 50 people? Even within our small team of 5, there's conflicts, or there can be miscommunication. How do you work with 20 people or 50 people all of a sudden?
Interesting.
I'm pointing Stephanie to answer that one.
Oh, really? Okay. Well, I'm happy to start. I mean, our company grew very quickly during COVID. We went from 7 to 21 over the course of 18 months. And I will say that there's lots of lessons learned. But one of the key lessons is really having people understand what their role is. And one thing that I do know about your business is that you are also a family business and that you're working with your brother. And so the family dynamics of a family business, that's another episode again. But I also have experience coming from a family business. And so just making sure that everybody understands what is their job description, making sure that that is covered and that it's documented. And so if you ever needed to go back to that. And then, of course, the ability to ensure that they have what it is they need to be successful for their role. And you do need to be building that along the way. Peggy's instilled in me process. And so this was, I want to say at least 6 years ago that Peggy said this to me. If you're going to scale, you absolutely need to have that repetition. So anyway, I would just speak on that, but I'd love to pass it off to somebody else who might have different insights.
I'll go.
Candice? Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm basically going to say a variation of what Stephanie has. I did not scale up quickly, but I've worked with 2 people and now I'm 25 or 30, depending on the time of the year. And everything goes better when everything is documented. You don't have to remember what you said. You don't have to remember what you agreed upon. Everything's documented. Everybody knows what they're supposed to be doing and what their role is. And it reduces the amount of times where there's miscommunications and misunderstandings. And then it reduces that conflict because then the people aren't getting upset. I've seen the more documented we are in our own firm, the better I see the culture getting within the firm. So that would be my piece.
And I would also add to that, as soon as you get, say, over 5 or 6 people, you need to start making sure that you have some sort of, I want to say, motivation or some sort of incentive to put the energy in the right place. So often with a larger group of people, if they have any amount of spare time, you will have personalities that start to create problems. If you can get the group to work together, both have an individual component of employee assessment as well as a team or a group component, it just goes so far to taking their energy away from, I don't know, gossip and picking on each other and whatnot, into focusing on what the team goals are and everyone getting there. And if you have any ability to give them some kind of compensation, as small as it is, frequently, quarterly, whatever, monthly, I don't know how often you would need to do it, just to keep them on target, it's huge.
I'm going to echo along the same kind of path. Process and systemization is going to be your biggest, helper. When you start looking to grow and expand, you're going to also need different key people involved. That doesn't mean you hire 10 VPs. What you could start with, it's exactly why, right, Chae? Who can afford that? What you may start with as you continue to grow and expand, you might see people start to kind of rise, or like cream of the crop starts rising in different areas or facets of your business. That's what we found. And so what we did was say, well, you're kind of the champion now in research. You're now the champion in the financial management side. You're now the champion over here with the export. You're the champion. So you might not need necessarily that next big title, but now we've again further developed the roles. We've got the champions in place, and that also alleviates some of those staffing issues because they've now got a sense of, this is mine. This is my piece. This is one of my purposes of why I'm coming here. And people don't like to, destroy things like that. They want to actually improve on it and feel good. And so it's a beautiful way for you to probably incentivize and also help people hone in as they grow in their career and their path as well. But as everyone's alluding to, as you go through this process, you want to have likely an external person now. You need some sort of external perspective to come in and take a look at the operations as a whole. And, there's many different people out there that can look at that. I mean, that's one of our specialties. You don't need to work with us. What I'm saying is the reason why you bring in an expert consultant in is because they'll see some of the gaps. And so some of the things you might be focused on, they might say, whoa, that's 10 steps down the road. What you need to do is this one first, because this is your biggest risk and your biggest issue. And that's going to take, and also maybe the longest time to get you ramped up. So that external perspective is fantastic because sometimes you don't see what's happening because you're in it every day, all day. So I love your attitude already because you're seeking help. You're seeking help on a platform, on a podcast where people are hearing, hey, she's seeking help. I mean, that's being vulnerable, but that's also being an entrepreneur and being very mature as far as I'm concerned. So that's fantastic for you. So hopefully a few of those pieces help. I think all of us have like 50,000 things we want to dump on you, but we're trying to be very cautious on how we speak and say. I know I am. Like, yeah. So I'm trying to, so just pick any of these apart. You've got time. And if you want to dive into something or didn't understand something, please ask.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean,
how does that feel, Chae?
Such helpful advice. I feel like as an entrepreneur, you're kind of always overwhelmed. That's like the default feeling that you have as an entrepreneur is just constantly being overwhelmed. And one day you're a therapist for your staff, and then another day you're begging your accounts on your knees. But yeah, I think with the biggest challenge for us is scaling and bringing new team members on board and how to deal with relationship dynamics and how to deal with conflicts. And at the same time, trying to keep your mental health steady with this overwhelming feelings of like, how do I move forward? How do I deal with this situation? And it's constant problem solving. So this has been like super helpful. My mom is a therapist and she deals with conflict resolution all the time. So she gives me a lot of helpful advice, but she's not much of an entrepreneur. So it's a really, really great advice coming from all of you guys.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I will say we're at our quickfire. And so for those who are listening, quickfire means that, here's an opportunity for us to add in anything, but also echo something that might have been spoken of. Chae, feel free if there's anything in there that you want to add to the conversation or feel like this really resonated, or a first step that you're going to take, feel free to take this time to do it. So as it is, it's quick. So maybe 30 seconds, 45 seconds, something like that. I think I'll just go first just to kick it off. And so what I love about what you actually just said was the mental wellness. And I think that is something that is very, very important. Right now, you're working in the business because you have to. And eventually, taking a couple of hours a week, start with that, to be working on the business, which means withdrawing from the office and not being accessible to your team necessarily, and really looking at what's happening. Are we hitting the numbers? Is, the direction that we're at right now, this month's targets, next month's target, are we on the road to success? I think is helpful. And then one other thing I will say, somebody had suggested to me, is actually getting some therapy between, founders that are related. And therapy could be in a couple of different ways. It could be a business coach to ensure that communication doesn't get taken off the rocker, because you're siblings first and then business partners. And so I think that's something that I've learned from others that seem to have worked really, really well. Okay, so I'll go with that. Candice, I'll pick you.
So, I'm going to go back to, I don't know, we had an episode on this before about, being an entrepreneur and thinking that you're alone in the world and maybe you're a little bit crazy. And maybe all those things are true, but that you're, a little bit crazy, that we do these things. We spend way more hours than the average person running a business because we're passionate about it. And because of that, we tend to feel a little bit siloed maybe, but I just want you to know, Chae, that there are hundreds of entrepreneurs out there and they all think that they're a little bit crazy maybe for doing this. And, but we can't help it. We love what we do and it's who we are. And, I'm really excited to see what you're doing with your business. So that's, it's not really useful advice, but
it's support.
Yes, it's support for sure.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Peggy, do you want to chime in?
Yeah, I want to just kind of echo what Candice said. I think one thing as being an owner of a company and having employees is you can't really confide in your employees. If you have a partner, sometimes you don't see eye to eye. And so who do you talk to then? And what I found very useful was I joined business groups where you meet monthly. It's a short meeting, either in the morning or in the evening, and you're talking to other like-minded people. And I gleaned so much knowledge from them just because I heard their stories, and some were a step ahead of me and some were a step behind me, and we were able to help each other and just feel not alone in the process. You do get a lot of connections from that as well. And over my career, I probably belonged to 3 of those different groups. And those people are very dear to me because, you kind of bare your soul to them and you get some really strong advice coming back. Even if they don't mean to give you advice, they tell their story and you get something from it. So I would really encourage that, especially if you can find similar aged entrepreneurs to yourself. I think that you will find that very useful. There are groups out there. McKay has one for larger companies, and I don't know who's the I can't remember business.
Well, I think even BC
Roundtable.
Food and Beverage, I think you're members of that as well. I think
Right.
that is another resource, because then they're like-minded and in similar industries, but no one's doing what you're doing in North America, right? So
yeah, it's you still a business. I mean, we talked about it here today. We talked about one of the primary problems is bringing on people, and every business has people, and every employer has to deal with all the same issues that you have in terms of people. And that's the one thing that I found was common amongst all of these business people in these business groups that I attended, is that the biggest asset to a business is its people, and the biggest point of stress or challenge is the people. So getting that part right is super important, and you can really learn a lot. And thank goodness your mom is a therapist. That's all I can say.
Yeah,
love that.
it's definitely a lot of support. Yeah.
Yeah, no kidding.
We might all need to speak to your mom, Chae. Sidebar. Chae, I'm just going to echo what everybody says. All great advice, everything else. One other key thing, mental health is huge. Did you know there's a mental health first aid course available? And I work with a lot of companies, and Candace, you alluded to it. Are we crazy to be entrepreneurs? I'd say yes. I'd say absolutely yes. We're all a bunch of nutters, but you're in good standing because we're all here with you. There's something different about us, but it's real, and there's different ways to approach conflict and resolution. And one of the first things is understanding and identifying things. So that could be something you may want to look into. I recently did recertify in that again, because that is absolutely huge. The next thing, as you continue to grow in your business, one of the things that I find would become helpful, and I know you said as an entrepreneur, we wear all hats, but as you continue to grow and scale, what I encourage you and your brother to do is take that time out and sit down and figure out, what is it that you enjoy doing the most, Chae? What is your passion? Because you need to stay in that passion. Otherwise, it's going to overwhelm you and potentially stop things and could really destroy things too. I've seen it all happen. What I found at this stage of the game with a lot of my clients, we focused you into your passion and said, okay, you are the R&D, you are the scientist, you love that. Let's put you into that R&D room, and you are happy all day long creating and building, and that makes you happy and passionate. The rest of it, it's time to start outsourcing. It's time to build that team. Again, starting with champions, potential experts from the outside helping you look into it. And then sorting out who's going to be managing the different areas of the business, because you're dealing not with one thing. You've got a manufacturing arm. That's a business in and of itself. You've got your sales arm. That's a business in and of itself. And you've got your BC division. And now you've got, the rest of Canada division, and now potential US division. You could be parceling some of these things out. There's different strategies involved. And, those are tax discussions. Those are legal discussions. Those are, consulting discussions. But again, take care of your health first. and I love, going back to, you've got your mom. I'll share that course and link if you need it. But you've also got the rest of the Serenity Sisters here. We've just met you. You can see we've pretty much all fallen in love with you. I'm sure you'd be able to reach out to any of us. We'd love to add support. And I'm sure Steph is going to likely invite you back, because we do want to hear how you move forward. We're very excited for you, your success, and congratulations again on all that you've done and what you've built so far.
Thank you so much.
So Chae, I'm going to have you go next. And just, is there anything in particular that you want to share in terms of like a key learning, or if you, have anything that you would like to add? And then we'll close out this episode.
Yeah. So just, I think that outside perspective is definitely really, really important for entrepreneurs. A lot of the times I just feel like I'm on an island with my brother, and we're just stuck there, and we're trying to figure out how to get out of the island, how to build a boat. And that's a very overwhelming feeling. And I think your employees are different, staff are great, but having an outside person, an outside organization, connecting with other entrepreneurs who are similar to where you are and maybe similar in age, in the industry, or has more experience than you, I think connecting with those people, it's very, very helpful. And I think so far I've tried, and I think like a lot of the time, a lot of help that we've received so far has been from networking in those organizations and meeting new people. I wouldn't have found out about Stephanie or Granted if we weren't members of BCFB. So I think that's really, really helpful advice. And I think no matter what stage you are in your business, you should always reach out and look for that outside perspective.
Rita, one last thought.
Sorry, this it might keep happening, Chae, but I love your attitude. I think you've already got the right attitude, is reaching out, asking questions, asking for help. That is probably going to be one of your biggest strengths of who you are and building and growing your company. Don't forget about different resources and associations to grow your business in terms of export. And export could mean within provinces and across Canada, as well as external to Canada. There's the Trade Accelerator Program, which is the TAP program. They're doing a women-led cohort specifically on women, and that starts in June. There's Women's Enterprise, or WeBC, and they do lots of teaching and training in that as well. And there's probably a slew of other organizations, and I'm sure we can share that with you offside because I think our time is up. But thank you so much again, Chae.
Yeah. Amazing. Well, love to always support the entrepreneurial community here at Serenity Now. And so thank you, Chae, for sharing your story and coming and asking a couple of key questions that I'm sure our listeners are thinking about, especially if they're at a stage of business where they're growing. And so that's it from us at Serenity Now. We'll put some resources on this episode so that we can also share that with our listeners as well. And good luck with your expansion with Earthling and everything that you and Jimmy are doing.
Thank you so much. Thank you again for inviting me.
Awesome.
Thanks for coming.
Okay.
Thank you.
That's it. We hope you enjoyed this episode and picked up some good tips and best practices that would benefit your entrepreneurial journey. Remember, none of the content in this podcast should be relied upon as standard legal or business advice. Always consult a professional for your specific business. You may know someone who could benefit from this podcast. Please share it with your business community, and perhaps it can give an entrepreneur some serenity now.